Now let's spark this place.
Music and sports, it's all the same. Making a name for yourself to get in the game. You're going hard in the paint, you're doing your thing. Keeping the crowd entertained while growing your fame. From the streets to the league, overseas. Wherever your talent takes you for the trophies. When you come into the system, just by all in. Go hard to the goal and put the ball in. Man, pause.
Yo, this is Trav with Trav's Mad Ballin's 8th episode. Of course, if you saw last week's episode, I gave you the opportunity to hear about what I did and what gives me the reason for doing what I do. What gives me credibility? Well, this week, my co-host Scott Veggie is back. I'm no longer solo. What's up, Scott?
Happening, Trav.
Well,
you want me to give my introduction now?
Well, I gave them my introduction last week, gave them a little bit about what gives me the credibility to do what I'm doing basketball-wise, or even the times when we kind of cross-reference different sports. I kind of gave them a little bit of a layout. And for those who may want to hear that, you can go back to our episode 7. Episode 7 has all of that information. But before we let Scott tell you why he has the credibility to do what he's doing, don't forget this broadcast is simulcast on YouTube. Not necessarily at the same time. Well, that would be a simulcast, right? But it is being recorded right now. The edited version will be the following day after we upload this podcast version, the audio version, onto SoundCloud. And since I mentioned SoundCloud, we're talking about Google Play, the App Store, SoundCloud. Hit us up there. So once again, subscribe to our channel if you are watching on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up. Share if you like what you're hearing. Help us out with this algorithm thing because it seems like I still can't figure it out. We're stuck at 43 freaking subscribers. We got to do better than that. Anyways.
Yeah, I need a new email address. I'll subscribe again.
Yeah, create some fake accounts. More thumbs up. But before we even get to that, once again, I'm going to throw it over to Scott. He's going to give you his reasons and what gives him the credibility to speak about basketball and even other things as we move forward. Hit him, Scott.
Thanks, Trav. I just want to say I love the game of basketball. I grew up in Jacksonville. Had some great coaches growing up. I had Rod McIntyre, who played with the JU national team when they went in 1970 and with Artis Gilmore and lost to JU. And he was 6'10", and I was about 3'6". I think I was like in 5th, 6th grade, and he scared the hell out of me, man. He was a big 6'10" guy. His hands were as big as tennis rackets. His face would get all red. We'd get down in the huddle, and he would scream at me. And so he scared me, but I got to tell you, we played amazing. I think we had a full court press back then, and I had some great teammates too. And so we really had a good time. And while I was growing up playing basketball, I was actually going out to the camp at Jacksonville University where Tate Slock was. And he was one of the most charismatic guys, disciplinarian, I've ever come across. If you've ever seen the movie Blue Chips with Shaquille O'Neal in there, it's been said that the character, Nick Nolte's coach character, is loosely based on Tate's life. So, and just a little more background about Tate. He was the coach at West Point who actually hired Bobby Knight, who actually ended up hiring Mike Krzyzewski. So, just a little bit on him. I also grew up loving the Gators. My father went to Florida, and that was indoctrinated into me at a very early age. And we used to go to JU basketball games back when they were pretty good, in the 70s and 80s. We would go when they played at the Coliseum. So I really loved that. And my grandfather, I think I've said this before, he went to Chapel Hill. So, and the big rivalry, Duke and Chapel Hill, I was a big Chapel Hill guy. So I think I've said this on the show before. I really grew up loving college basketball, and I'm worried it's becoming irrelevant now. I don't know if that's just because I'm hacked off because this Gator team isn't living up to my expectations. But there's so much one and done, and the name, image, and likeness, and the transfer portal. And, there's some good things about the transfer portal. I would say certainly in college football, there are a lot of good things because, I mean, we've gotten to see some quarterbacks we may have never gotten to see. Would we have ever seen Justin Field at the University of Georgia? Would we have ever seen Joe Burrow at Ohio State? Maybe not. So there are definitely some upsides, I think, to the transfer portal. But it gets to the point where there's so much in college basketball that, by the time you remember somebody's name, they're off and gone. So that's about it.
Well, as far as that goes, college basketball, I think, is changing. I think we had an episode on that before. It's changing because of things like the NIL. And that's not just football, but also basketball. And we're talking about things like Overtime Elite, which is now giving kids an opportunity to play in their own league, skipping their final year of high school if they wanted to. I think it goes from 16 to 19 years old. So they're able to skip their time in high school, go there, and they're being taught there with tutors as well. And as I might have mentioned in that same episode, a few episodes back, if you want to find it, Overtime Elite also takes care of their education and gives them up to $100,000, I believe, if they're not drafted. So it really looks out for him. And as more opportunities like that come, the better players will go to those kinds of leagues because they can get their money on a lower level, and then it still prepares them for the big money and not have to worry about all that NCAA nonsense. Like you have Matt Walsh, who's a former Gator, who has a team in Australia, an organization. I think he actually is an owner down there, and he's bringing players down there. And in my opinion, I've stated it more than once, I believe Australia is the second best country in the world when it comes to basketball. And these players are going there 15, 16 years old, maybe 17 years old, playing against those pros, and they're more than ready when the NBA draft comes along.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know Kyrie Irving is from Australia.
No, well, Kyrie Irving, he's from New Jersey. He might have been.
I guess maybe he was born in Australia.
He might have been. That's one thing I didn't know. I know Patty Mills is, but I didn't know that Kyrie Irving was born in Australia. If he was, I guess he's the greatest Australian-born player right now. He takes the title from Luke Longley, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, this is episode number 8, and I wanted to give Scott an opportunity to tell you why he has the credibility he has to be able to talk basketball. But on top of that, the topic we had today, if you watched last week's show, today's show is about the Mount Rushmore of college basketball coaches. That's right. Pimp that shirt, boys. Let them know what's up. You know what I'm saying? So you can throw that in the mix too. But the Mount Rushmore of college basketball coaches. Who's your idea of a Mount Rushmore worthy college basketball coach? And it doesn't necessarily have to be the consensus, as long as you can back it up genuinely with what you're saying. Don't just mention your best friend and then tell you how great a guy he is and think that's good enough. We have great coaches out there. John Wooden's probably going to be on everyone's list. But if you don't believe he needs to be on your list, you don't have to put him there, as long as there's someone that probably wouldn't be in his stead, but someone else that you could at least explain why you've come to that conclusion. So with that said, we're going to hit this thing off, and I'll let you pick, Scott, your first name on the Mount Rushmore of college basketball, and then I will follow up with mine.
Well, like I said before, when it comes to North Carolina, I'm definitely more of a Chapel Hill guy than a Duke guy. But I got to say, looking at the numbers, Krzyzewski, I've got to put him at the top. I mean, he's got over 1,000 wins. I think he's, over 1,100 wins now. He's got 5 national championships. He, like I said before, he was actually the captain of the team. He played at West Point. And then he became an assistant coach from Bobby Knight hired him as the assistant coach, and then he became a head coach. Then he went to Duke, and I mean, he's just been spectacular there. He's been, I think it's 42 years now he's been at Duke, and so he's won a number of national championships. He's won 3 gold medals, I think 2 as a head coach. Now he's had a number of great players, but when you talk about good college coaches, more so than the pros, I mean, recruiting is such a huge part of that. And he has been an amazing recruiter. So, I mean, and he's had great players played for him. Unfortunately, I think in recent years, it seemed like Kentucky kind of started out under Calipari doing the one and done thing. That's kind of become the pattern now, more at Duke. I mean, that's Krzyzewski's just playing the game the way it is. So I think it's really interesting. And I call him, when I look at these, Mount Rushmores, I call him the contradiction, because today it's like he's seen as this nice guy and this pleasant guy and this great person. And, the interesting thing was I looked at a video of him in 2010. It was right after John Wooden passed away. And I think it was Nightline was profiling him. And they use words like he stews and steams and swears on the sidelines. He's plaster-haired, vein-popping, supremely confident. Some say arrogant. And, I felt about him that way for a long time, and I kind of forgot about that, because I think since 2010, we've seen him cry, and we've seen his more sensitive side. Now he's retiring, and, he really, I think he is a great person, to his players. He's a really great person, but he's, we forget. He used to be a pretty polarizing guy, as has the whole Duke team traditionally.
So that's your guy. Coach K is the first guy. Now, it doesn't have to be in any particular order. You could have your best guy last, your best guy in the middle, your worst guy first. If you're going to pick a worst guy out of Mount Rushmore, you're just splitting hairs right there. Well, I'm going to go in another direction with the first person I'm about to present as my first name on my Mount Rushmore. And he's the arch rival of the guy you had just spoken about, and that is Dean Smith. What is a Mount Rushmore without Dean Smith? I mean, he became coach in 1961, and it's not even what makes him a great coach. We know about the X's and O's, we know about the championships, we know about the players, but a lot of the things he did off of the court. At a time in 1961 in the South, we already know how things could have gone awry, and sometimes they did. And what he had done and what he stood for, it really, really helped in terms of the way he was able to communicate with his players. He was able to integrate and give a scholarship to his players, unlike Adolph Rupp, who pretty much chose not to segregate until he was forced to segregate and, desegregate, make it. And Dean Smith is the guy on my list. I mean, 11 Final Fours. Like I said, just 2 championships, but I think there's more into it than just the championships. And he graduated 96% of his players. Let's not forget that part. So more goes into it than the wins and losses. We remember the wins and losses. And I'm not even talking about players who end up going on to the NBA. We're talking about guys who are on campus and being competitive and winning championships with him. And he was able to do that. And we saw the litany of players. I mean, Jordan, Worthy, Kenny Smith, right? And Rasheed Wallace, Jerry Stackhouse, Brad Daugherty,
James Worthy.
Antoine Jameson, J.R. Reed, the list goes on and on. And that's his contribution to college basketball, not just on the basketball court, making children or kids into men and making them who they are when they do go to the NBA. So he's my first guy. Dean Smith.
Yeah, I can't say enough good things about Dean Smith. The interesting thing was he kind of called himself a dictator, and I saw some practice tape of him, and he was yelling at his players. But he was such a quiet, unassuming guy. And his father, I think, actually integrated his team in Kansas. I think he was a high school coach. He did it, early on. And I think like the high school league said, you can't do that or something like that. He said, that's cool, I'll just quit. And they go, okay. Yeah, right. So, I mean, his father blazed a really good trail for him. And yeah, a real positive impact he had on his players. And, we were talking about, Kenny Smith. And when he showed up on campus, he said it was like his third day there, and it was like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. He runs into Sam Perkins and these guys, and they've got their running clothes on. And he said no coaches were around. And he's like, what's going on? And Perkins is like, oh, we go run. We run every night. Mm-hmm. And so, Kenny Smith joined in and went and did it. And that's, I think, goes to that point what you're talking about, not just good players, but good people too.
Exactly. And when you get to something like that, that's the difference between people who are good and satisfied with being good and just going to school and playing for a prominent program, and those who put in that extra time because they have a bigger dream than just college basketball. They have their NBA aspirations and not just getting there, but blowing the doors off the NBA as well. So who's your number two?
Number two is John Wooden. I know it's a low-hanging fruit. I'm going to grab it. I mean, you talk about having had 9 national championships. He had from 67 to 73, he won every national championship. Then he won again in 75. And, you know, people talk about, you know, him being such a people person. He had these principles of leadership. And he talked about, you know, the pyramid of success. And he had a 7-point creed. And I saw a really interesting thing of him where he talked about winning versus succeeding. And he was, you know, he really developed a person much in the same way that Dean did. And I think Krzyzewski has too. And he was talking about, you know, winning. I mean, I wonder if he would have said this when he was playing, but this was after, you know, he was coaching. He said, you know, winning's not everything. And I found that out. He goes, because we went a number of seasons where we were undefeated. And he said, and some of the alumni were not happy with that because they were expecting bigger spreads at certain points. And he said, if I didn't know better, I think, you know, they might have had a financial stake in what the spreads were. And he also talked about, he started out as a teacher. And the thing he said, that if you've ever been a teacher, cracked me up. He goes, you know what the interesting thing was is every single parent always thought their kids deserved an A or a B. They said the C was okay for the neighbor kids because he was average, but their kids were above average.
Isn't that always the case?
Yeah, I mean, he was really funny and gave a lot of perspective about those things. But, you know, you think about the players he's had over the years, Bill Walton, Kareem, Jamal Wilkes, just to name a few.
Yeah.
And he's really thought of as a nice guy, and that's his legacy. But I also saw some tape going back to when he played, and I mean, he was a really aggressive guy, and he would yell a lot, and he would even trash talk the other players. They talked about how he always had that roll-up program in his hands. You can kind of see his stress through that. But what one of the players said, when he would kind of trash talk to the other team and say things like, "Oh, we got a player who's going to shut you down tonight. I can't wait to see him get on you." And he would really get in players' heads where they would think like, "Is that Coach Wooden talking to me?" So, I mean, he was a great person, and I think it was Krzyzewski who said he was even a better person than he was a coach. But you know, obviously a big competitor, and just his winning speaks for itself. Now, the one thing that, you know, he didn't have that a lot of other players had, he didn't coach for a long time. He only coached for 12 years. Which, when you consider the success he had, he won 9 national championships in 12 years. You can understand it, but that's one of the things that I think a lot of the coaches we think of have more years than that.
Yeah, you know, that is the low-hanging fruit. Anybody can go with John Wooden, and you will not be wrong if you did not go with John Wooden. If you went with John Wooden, you can't be wrong. But I may be a little wrong because I did not go with John Wooden for this pick right here. Now, of course, all of those players that he's had, they turned out to be a lot of great NBA players, all-time greats, in Kareem Abdul-Jabbar moving on and playing in the NBA. But you're supposed to win when you have that kind of talent. And guess what? He didn't let us down like Calipari can do. Take these quality players and still lose with them. If he doesn't have #1 picks overall in Kentucky, he loses. He doesn't win championships consistently unless he has #1 picks and all lottery picks playing against little college guys. But that's just how it is. My second guy, this guy had an overall record. He ended his career with 596 wins, 296 losses. Doesn't sound great, but it's a 71% winning percentage. He has 1 championship though. And it's just as much about what goes on the court as it is off the court. And I'm a real big proponent of what happens off the court as well in terms of greatness, because you can be great off the court, be pretty good on the court, and be looked at as a great person or a great figure. And this person does that to the point to where he even walked out of the game against BC back in, I believe, 1989, because they were trying to find loopholes in that Prop 48 they once had with Prop 42. Right. Prop 42 was the loophole for Prop 48. And what that was, it was saying that if you did not hit a certain threshold academically coming out of high school on the test scores, SAT, ACT, well, you could still get a scholarship, but you could not play in your freshman year. And John Thompson, as we know him, that's my guy. He was the one who stood up against it. He put his money where his mouth is. His actions spoke louder than his words. He was going to walk out of it. He walked out of the Boston College game, but threatened to do that same thing when Allen Iverson came with all of his past to Georgetown and they played Villanova. And they talked about how Allen Iverson had made a comparison with O.J. Simpson. And he said he would walk out on national television, a nationally televised game, if they didn't get those people out of the stadium. Now, I'm typically think people can heckle you whichever way they want, but this guy stood for that. And if it irked him, it really mattered. So, and by the way, as far as that Prop 48 deal goes, Dwayne Wade was a Prop 48. And we see how he turned out. You know what I mean? He didn't have any problems at Marquette. He goes to the Heat. He's a Hall of Famer, the third best shooting guard, pretty much consensus in history. So, and then you look at the emphasis on the grades in which John Thompson really spoke on. He talked about not just being a great basketball player, but being a great person and going out to society and doing great things. Now, he was really big on the academics until time kind of passed on, and Allen Iverson didn't stay for the entire 4 years. He ended up leaving. But the types of players he had, Patrick Ewing, as you already know, Alonzo Mourning is another player that he had. And let's not forget Allen Iverson, but Dikembe Mutombo, he aligns with what John Thompson did and what he respected academically. Georgetown, under John Thompson, graduated 97% of their players. You know, and this isn't just athletes graduating. These are people who are doing the right thing and taking the right classes and graduating. Dikembe Mutombo is probably the smartest person to ever come through the NBA, so let alone Georgetown. And
a good person too. I think he helps out
absolutely.
Like hospitals and things like that. I think philanthropist.
And even last year, Georgetown graduated the highest ever, 98%. But going back to Mutombo, he speaks 9 different languages, 5 different dialects of
derelicts,
dialects of Africa, and we see what he does as far as what he does for his own country, what he's done had foundations. He's an absolutely brilliant person. He's gotten his bachelor's degree early on, and now he came back after his NBA career and got his doctorate. All of that, in my opinion, compounded by being coached by someone who put education up front and close and personal, John Thompson.
And as I recall, Thompson thought, I think he thought all players should at least have to go to some college before they went to the NBA.
Yeah, he was a little, not perturbed, but it was going against what he believed when Allen Iverson left after his sophomore year. But the reasons why Allen Iverson left was because he needed the money. His family was going through their issues, like a lot of the inner city kids. You know, going to Georgetown, by the way, one of the most prestigious schools in the country as well. And you look at their student body and you look at the test scores of the student body, the basketball team wasn't in the SAT and the ACT scores weren't commensurate with student body to basketball team. That's probably everywhere because even Princeton does that, by the way. You know what I mean? Princeton will let someone in who plays football well if you have a 32, whereas that's and the 32 to ACT is outrageous. But when you have people who average 35 and 36 because 36 is as high as you can get, the number 1 percentile in the country, well, that's another level. But they do open the door for those kinds of athletes if they have a 32, which will get you into 98% of the schools in the freaking country, 99.
Yeah, but I think Bill Clinton went to Georgetown.
Yeah, Bill Clinton, he did go to
Your
Georgetown.
favorite president.
My favorite president, okay. My favorite president, we all know who that is. There's a 1A and 1B now, but I'll just leave that for another day or maybe no day at all. So who's your number 3? Before I get
number 3 is, of course, you know, the great Billy Donovan. You know, I figure he's one of your favorites. He grew up in Long Island. I think he played for the Knicks for like a day and a half. But he started out under Calipari. Actually, let me back that up. He went to Providence. And let me say this about Donovan as a player. Sometimes we talk about that otherworldly discipline that some players have, like Reggie Miller we talked about. I talked about who would shoot for 3 hours before each game. Donovan was kind of that same guy. In high school, he would prop the door open after practice was over so he could come back and practice shooting. And there's a story about his mother getting up in the middle of the night. Where the hell is he's not here? His dad said, his dad was a basketball guy. He's like, don't worry, he's down at the gym practicing his shots. And eventually, they just gave him a key to the gym. And, that's just the kind of dedication he had as a player. Wasn't a tall guy, 5'11", great, 3-point shooter. Played at Providence for Rick Pitino. And, I think played for like 5 minutes for the Knicks. And then went and became an assistant to Pitino at Kentucky. Coached Marshall for a few years, then came to Florida, got them to the national championship in his fourth season, and lost to Michigan and Mateen Cleaves. He was a great recruiter. He's one of those people. Sometimes we talk about hardcore disciplinarians, like your Bob Knight, like your Tate Slock, your maybe John Thompson. I know he was pretty rough on Allen Iverson, but then you have like the nice guys like Billy Donovan. That was one of his great skills, and that's what makes him one of the greats, is his ability to recruit. And he brought in a bunch of these kids whose fathers played in the NBA. He had Torian Green, he had Al Horford. Well, Al Horford's father played in the pros, and then he had Joakim Noah. Joakim Noah's father didn't play in the NBA, but he was a professional tennis player. And I can remember watching his father win the French Open. And Joakim, when Joakim first got there, I was like, oh, that's cool. That's Yannick Noah's son. But his first year, he wasn't that great. And but from his first year to his second year, he was improved by leaps and bounds. No one was expecting that. They weren't even ranked in the preseason, but they ended up winning the national championship. And that was like one of the most fun days of my life, because all day long I'm listening to sports radio, and you got like Reggie Miller, you got Bill Walton, you got all these UCLA guys, and they're all saying the same thing. They're like, look, man, it's nice of the Gators to show up. It really was kind of them to come, and we appreciate it. And UCLA is going to, it's going to be ugly how bad, they're going to beat the Gators. And what a great team. Billy Donovan's a great guy. And I remember when they were going through those playoffs, they were somebody in the press asked Joakim Noah, they're like, well, you're about to go out and play Georgetown and whatnot. And he's like, I don't know, man, the Gator boys are hot. And that scared me when they played Georgetown, who had Roy Hibbert and Jeff Green, and they handled it easily. And then they went on and they handled UCLA. They beat them by I think 15 points or so. So that was a lot of fun. But the other reason I put Donovan in there is because we won back-to-back national championships. They went back the next year. They beat Ohio State with Greg Olson, who that guy, scared the heck out of me. But they just handled him, and they played like a team.
The guy who couldn't stay healthy in the NBA.
Yeah, he couldn't stay healthy in the NBA at all. But yeah, I was watching something about Donovan was being interviewed, and he said, that I asked the same thing of all my players, and that is, to love each other, to care for each other, and to look out for one another. And, that really, it gave his players ownership, and they brought their own discipline and things like that. And I think, when you talk about, nice guys versus disciplinarians, he was definitely, he was a nice guy. But, he first shot to fame when he first got at Florida. He was obviously a disciplinarian too, because they played that full court press defense. So you got to be in good shape to do that.
Yeah, a little Nolan Richardson's 40 minutes of hell from Arkansas kind of defense, trying to put that pressure on from the very beginning. Now, with 5 minutes left, by the way, I knew that was coming sooner or later. This trash.
I just wanted to show this is my objective hat, my objectivity.
I see. And after that little story about Billy Donovan, I see why it made its cameo today. And luckily, my number 3 guy was your number 1 guy, which is Coach K. So you did a lot of the speaking about it. I was kind of filling the blanks. You mentioned his winning record, 1,188 wins, 364 losses, which is that's outstanding. 77% in a major conference. He split his time between Army and Duke. As you mentioned, Bobby Knight was his coach at Army. And by the way, Bill Parcells was also there when Bobby Knight was there. So that's kind of crazy how that goes down. But yeah, Coach K, without a question, one of the greatest, if not arguably the greatest coach, considering the time period in which he coaches and the way scholarships are now distributed as opposed to when, John Wooden had done it. It's the same as when Barry Switzer or Paul Bear Bryant, when they got their scholarships, when they had a huge allotment of scholarships, and backups were just super phenomenal, just as good as the starters, and the starters were just upperclassmen. That's the only thing that, made them starters in a lot of cases. But Coach K, without a question, championships in 91, 92, 01, 2010, 2015. I mean, what more can you say about that? He's a 3-time Naismith Coach of the Year award winner, and the types of players he had come through there. There was a little bit of a stigma once upon a time about how good players were at Duke and how good they weren't when they had gotten to the NBA. But Grant Hill is up there as far as one of the best players he's had. Kyrie Irving only played 1 season, but he's still up there in the pantheon. Bobby Hurley is one of those guys I really liked, and I wish he hadn't gotten injured. Christian Laettner, Zion Williamson, Shane Battier, Jason Tatum, your guy up there in Boston.
Jason Tatum, Grant Hill.
Elton Brand, underrated.
Brand,
Is Elton Brand the most underrated Duke player ever, and going to the NBA and still being a quality player? J.J. Redick, and now you have Paolo Banchero right now as the high school player coming out. And Coach K, he takes the cake. So with about a couple of minutes left, who's your number 4?
My number 4 is we've already done all mine. Dean Smith was my other one, and I've talked a lot about him. I would just say on my honorable mention, like you mentioned, John Thompson. I would throw in Jim Boeheim, Jim Calhoun, and Bobby Knight.
Well, my
definitely a different kind of coach.
My number 4 is a little bit different because I had to really tackle it a little bit because there was a little bit of a bias, if not a lot of bias. Rick Pitino is my guy. He's the point guard whisperer of New York point guards. And I'm always going to be grateful for what he's done just for New York point guards, what he's done for college basketball, even for my Knicks when he was coaching there. But I went with the man who had 706 wins, 198 losses in his career, a 78% winning percentage, one of the best of all time. He's the only one with 7 on the list in terms of winning percentage that's up there with Adolph Rupp. Adolph Rupp in terms of his overall record. And he's from Tumbleweed Tech. Do you remember Tumbleweed Tech, or you don't keep up with things like that? He was a coach at Pasadena Junior College in California before going to Long Beach State and skidding and entering the city of entertainment, Las Vegas. Jerry Tarkanian.
Tart the Shark.
Tart the freaking Shark. One of my favorite coaches, and I think if the NCAA didn't mess with him and make it a 24-hour job to do so, he would be the number 1 coach, not because he would have won so many more championships, but they've been on his ass from the time he was at Long Beach State. They would not leave him alone. And for what happened at Long Beach State when he was there and before, they tried to come after UNLV about that. But look at the quality of players he's had. Reggie Fierce, as we already know, a quality player, and down in Bethune-Cookman now as an athletic director. He was a coach at one point, and he played for the Magic, the Kings, the Nets, blah blah blah. The Hawks, and his team averaged 110 points, and that was what a 3-point line at one point. And so you're talking.
Well, I thought they were Phi Slamma Jamma.
Fly Slamma Jamma. They were slamming anybody. And this is before they went to the Big West. They were independent. In 1977, they played North Carolina in the Final Four. They were up by 10, and they ended up losing by 1. So that was their first opportunity to get there. They saw what it was all about. But right after that is when the NCAA Nazis came after them and tried to get the penalties and all this other nonsense. And he was such a great coach and respected in Las Vegas, a place where no one thought coaching or a college team would survive, that he was able to get Jim Graziano. He had Frank Sinatra call him up as a recruit. He called him up, Graziano, Sinatra.
The chairman.
Frank Sinatra called him up, and he refused to come to the UNLV. He ends up going to South Carolina and averaging 8.4 points. Kick that 8.4 points. We got 110 points scoring over here. So
this young kid's going, who is Frank Sinatra?
Well, you know what?
Fossil.
Check out my way, and you'll know for sure. But they were hit with sanctions, and we can always remember that UNLV squad from 1991 or 1990 and 91. And they blew out, which is still a record to this day in an NCAA championship game. 30 points. That UNLV team beat Coach K with Christian Laettner and Bobby Hurley, just absolutely dominated them in that first game. And then the second game, of course, they met in the Final Four, the final season. But in that final season, arguably one of the best seasons before that loss of any college team to ever play. They averaged
Larry Johnson.
Oh yeah, Larry Johnson, Stacey Augman, Greg Anthony, Anderson Hunt. It was just nasty across the board. Larry Johnson became the first pick overall of the NBA draft, going to the Charlotte Hornets back then. Old grandmama. But they averaged over 28 points of victory that year.
I didn't know Tark was at LBC. He was in the LBC before he went to UNLV. I wonder if he knew Snoop and
Lloyd Daniels. Lloyd Daniels came with his poor grades and probably shouldn't have gotten past the first grade because he ended up reading at a third grade reading level going to UNLV. A lot of issues, man. And then he was dealt with the drugs and all that stuff and got busted. But that's my guy.
You're telling me UNLV is not an academic powerhouse? Come on.
Not anymore. They decided to give it up once they fired. In fact, they didn't even fire him. He left. And then he went to Fresno State, and not only at Fresno State, he had my main man, Skip to my Lou. Rayford Alston was at Fresno State, and if you see the intro to this show, you will see that I have that Slam magazine, the greatest point guard you never heard of. Rayford Alston, Skip to my Lou. So those are my four who belong on the Mount Rushmore of college basketball. Any parting words, Scott? Because we're way over, but what the hell? We can do what we want. Listen to us.
Great time. I got to tell you, I had so much fun prepping for this program because it reminded me of the greatness of college basketball and the great coaches and the great players. And, I hope it's not becoming irrelevant like I'm concerned it is because, it's got such rich history with the players and the coaches and the programs and the, dynasties. I hope it makes a comeback.
Well, we'll have our memories if nothing else at all. And these young kids that do decide to play in the NCAA as it is right now, will make the most with those people and the superstars who seem to skip over college basketball and go to something in entities like Overtime Elite or going to the pros in Australia or anywhere else overseas. We'll watch them too and wish them the best along the way. And we'll also look at that show and see how you're pimping it out. That's right. Yo, Trav, Ballin. Not everyone can be a baller, including me, but Scott can because he already described what his basketball journey was. That gives him a lot of credibility this day and age. I am Yo Trav, and once again, subscribe to the channel if you're going to watch this on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up. Get us out of this basement of 43 subscribers. Are you kidding? We have a lot of people who've actually watched the video going by my back office and analytics, but they don't like this. They don't like it. They actually like some of the things, but they don't do anything. No interaction, no comments or whatever. Go ahead and do us that solid. Let's try to get to 1,000. It may take 1,000 years, but let's get there.
Tell us we suck, especially if it's Travis. Tell him he sucks.
You know what? It wouldn't be the first time I've heard that. But you've heard it before, and it's not because of basketball. Anyway,
bring it on.
For Scott, G, I'm Trav, signing off on episode number 8 of Yo Trav's Mad Ballin'. We'll catch you on 9.